Hello and welcome. This episode, all I'm doing is showing you this truck. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So I'm going to be including some pictures in this video as well. As I talk about things, I'll show you kind of what I did as I was building. But otherwise, we're just going to kind of look at this truck and I'll tell you all the different modifications that I did, the aftermarket parts that I had gotten, and how I did all the cool paint and stuff to it. So the kit I started with was a Tamiya Grand Hauler. Without further ado, here we go. Let's get this cab off of here. Flip this. So heavy, big truck. First thing I started with was axles. 1 centimeter or 10 millimeter drop axle. So if you look at this arm here, you can see it drops way more than a normal axle that comes out of the box. It's also aluminum machined, as well as the knuckles. They came with it. They're aluminum machined knuckles. The knuckles are the same as the original, they're just machined aluminum. That lowered the axle so much, in fact, that I actually needed to curve the spring. You can see how it goes down and then back. The other thing you'll notice now is the axle is no longer centered on the leaf. And for an example of how far I moved this, that little rivet right down there, that should be under the center of this. And same with the shock tower. I moved it from here, re-drilled new holes over here to push it further up to the bumper. The reason to do that, they make it like an American truck style, but in doing that, it's just generic. To make it more Peterbilt specific, you got to move that axle. So that's what I did. And the other thing to really lower it, so these are RC4WD lowrider tires is what they're called, lowrider. So it's a low profile semi-truck tire, and I mounted it on Integy T8 machined aluminum wheels. So you can see they have this nice little center cap on here that screws on. There's a little tool for this, but I just finger tied them in there anyway. So you pull that nut, the whole thing comes off. Once you pull it off, on the back you have Allen screw heads for these lugs, and you can unscrew them and take it off of what looks like the actual hub that a real truck would have back there. On this one, they're black hubs in the center, as you can see through the threads, with the gunmetal center cap. Now another thing you'll see is on the inside of these center caps, there's a little, right by my thumbnail here, there's a little O-ring, and that's nice because it's almost like a what's it called, Loctite. When you tighten it up, you don't have to crank it on there, and it'll keep it from turning off. You saw how hard it was just for me with my fingernails here to get it off. So it's not going to come off on its own, so you don't lose it. That's cool. So I did glue them on. I've read a lot of people say you don't have to. I did, because I'm not about that life. And for these, I disassembled them completely and Loctited every single piece of hardware on here. I got matching set of rear dually wheels for the back. The back was all standard axles, but one thing I did is before I put it all together, I painted them. See, my truck is really long, so it's actually 32-inch frame rails from Semi Joe's RC truck shop. I got a bunch of stuff off of there. He's got some good stuff, so you'll hear a bunch of them. But anyway, so I got those from him. These ones, now they're a little bit taller than the original frame rails, just a tiny bit. So when it comes back to these next mounts that hold your air tank and your steps, you have to file down a little bit off of. I chose, I think, the bottom to file off of, the bottom lip, so that way it can actually reach around this. Otherwise it can't reach it. Just so to get it to reach around, you got to file it a little bigger so it'll reach around. But that's how close it is. Probably less than 1/8 of an inch in difference in frame rail height. But they're custom, full length. They're not stretched with little pieces from eBay or anything. It's a frame rail that replaces the original. And Semi Joe drills them, so it was drilled for the stock kit. That's why these holes are here, because I just got them drilled for the stock, and I figure any modifications I'll do, I'm not worried about if I end up with a few extra holes. And again, the frame I painted before I assembled the suspension onto it and everything else. The transmission here, I also painted that red after I assembled it, and that is the one that comes in the kit. It's the original 3-speed Tamiya transmission. I got an 80 turn motor, and I put, instead of the 10-tooth pinion, I put a 9-tooth pinion. Now, one thing I've noticed with this motor, I'm using the MFC01, which, as you can see, this is a complete mess. So many people in the forum said, you know, there's better stuff, don't get it. I completely agree. I got it because, you know, I knew a bunch about RC, but I haven't done anything in a few years, and I certainly didn't have anything this intricate before. So I wanted to start with stuff that was made to go together. And I quickly found out that MFC01's limitations. One thing, it doesn't seem to power this completely. So if you're in 1 speed, for instance, it doesn't seem like full throttle is full throttle because the motor stalls out still. And even if, let's say, you put it in the 3rd speed, the fastest speed, and you give it full throttle, it still doesn't feel like it gives it full throttle, because it's like, I got other RC trucks that have regular speed controls in them, and you go full throttle, especially just the truck this light, it's going to just go, right? Those wheels are at full speed. I have them geared higher than this one's geared too, and they just instant full speed. You know, it'll climb anything, it'll pull tons of stuff, it'll break axles and stuff before you'll run out of motor. But this will run out of motor. So I know there's a trick where with MFC01 and you have your 5th wheel back here, you pull the little switch out and you just connect the 2 wires so it always thinks the trailer's engaged. And it does give more power when the trailer is engaged when you have that, but I still don't think it's full. So I'm going to be getting rid of that here at some point. I found one that might also include my lights, or at least give me a better output for that. We'll get into that in a bit. And you can kind of program it to do what you want. So I'm going to get me one of them, and I'm probably going to keep all this because I like this. There's no reason that this and this won't work well together. It just, that hurts it big time for sure. Upgraded my servos. It tells you to put standard servos in here, and I used 20 kg high torque digital servos, which I painted red. I installed them in the frame because you couldn't have to put the frame together. So I installed them before I painted everything, or when I painted everything, so they're kind of painted with it. So they don't work with this either. So these will be powered separately from a BEC, but they're still getting signal from the MFC01. If you don't do that, the MFC01 will just kind of brown out and reset because it can't handle the power. Moving on. The bumper. The bumper did not come with the kit either. This is one I had found on eBay. Now, I did some modifications to it as well. The bumper would hold it up, hold the front tires off the ground. So I had to cut 10 millimeters off of it. As you can see, I can barely get my finger under it still. I think if it were taller, it would probably fit a original height truck well, but not this truck being lowered. And then you'll see I also added some lights in it. So I drilled 4 holes on each side and put little tiny, man, I forget the number for them, but like the little LEDs that would be in like an Xbox controller. I put those behind there so they light up through it. They're orange, so they're the good marker lights. And then on the back, you don't see there's any wires or anything. It's just smooth back here. So what I did there was I hot glued the wires, and I used magnet wire so it was really thin, and I hot glued it to the back of the bumper and ran it up, and then I cut a thin piece of 32 thousandths aluminum sheet and hot glued it over all of that stuff. So there's no wires hanging out. It's nice and clean. You see the side. You don't see the back of the lights. It doesn't light up through there. It looks like a real truck bumper, right? Now this, on the eBay, it was like 30 something bucks, I think, but it doesn't come polished. It just comes with a mill finish. So if you don't know what a mill finish is, it's straight out the mill. So it has you can see all the mill cutting marks on it, the little swirls from the cutter spinning and milling it down. It was covered in those. Same with the other parts as I go through this. All the aluminum parts I got came that way. So keep that in mind as I talk about them. I had to go back and hand sand these down. Ended up all the way to, I think I went to 2000 grit before I busted out some polish and polished them up. All the aluminum on this truck, there's not a whole lot, but there's a good bit, and I spent probably, I don't know, a week's worth of time just sanding and polishing aluminum throughout this build. Moving on, this is from the kit. It's just all bolted down. This is the OB1 RC professional LED system, version 3.1 MFC. So I think I have a little bit of a problem with it because I think my receiver's right here, and it also has, as you see here, there's the satellite receiver. It's actually from an airplane. I used a Spectrum AR6210. So it's a 6-channel, and it's an air receiver. So it's got this, so you get an extra super strong signal, right? And I think this is interfering with it because it almost like cuts out periodically. It did great before I had this. Now I have this, it cuts out. So I think the Bluetooth in this is too close to that, or the antennas or something, the wires, and it just doesn't. And then the trailer will kind of black out periodically. I think the signals are crossing and they're not liking being so close. So whenever I get rid of this, I'm going to redo this electronics area. I'm going to move this probably towards the back of the truck so it's completely away from there. And what this does, this wirelessly talks to the trailer. There's another matching one in the trailer, so the trailer lights up based on the commands from the MFC 01. And then my battery that I use in there, there's the 2S 3300. It's a Nanotech LiPo battery. Now you'll see this back plate here. This was a sheet of, I don't know, 50 thousandths, I can't remember. Aluminum though. And I just cut it, sanded it, polished it, drilled it, put it on there. Didn't come with the kit or anything. That was all me. I really wanted to seal this up. So here's the lights. I put lights in all my lights on the roof, which I have extras. Lights in all of these holes and all here, in there, in the back bumper, in the middle bumper, in the filler plate between the tank. There's a lot of lights on this truck. You know, I've seen more, but there's a good bit of lights. More than I'd done before. So if you look, these wires here, so these plugs right here, this group of, what, 5 plugs is just for your roof lights, to put them in pairs. And then I got all these wires that run out to all those, and a lot of lights. So the MFC01 only has a couple spots to plug them in, and it actually runs out of juice. So I had to work up a separate thing, and I put some little, what are they called, relays on here. So the relay plugs into there, and then this is powered independently from a BEC connected to the battery. So the MFC01, when it turns on and off its lights, these relays go click, click, and it'll turn these on accordingly. So all the MFC01 is doing is turning on these relays. Now, it works for the blinkers, it works for the lights on and off, and the marker lights on and off. It does not work for the brake lights. So I have no brake lights. That's another thing that I don't like about the MFC01. Whenever I switch the other to the whatever the other one is, I'll be able to use it. This is actually something I made from scratch. It's a board with a whole bunch of plugs and resistors specifically to be able to use these relays. So to make the board, it's a double-sided board. I drew out my own traces with Sharpie on there, and then I used some etching acid to etch off all the bare spots around it so it only left my traces. Then I was able to use alcohol and wipe it clean. And then I had a circuit board with hand-drawn traces, and then I was able to solder all my components on there and have a nice, neat thing. I could have done it without that, but then you'd have bundles of wires and nasty, ugly stuff that would have been difficult to keep straight. So now let's close this up, and then we'll take a look at the outside. All right, there we go. So now, on the outside of this truck, few simple, easy modifications. So, like I said, I moved the axle forward so I could make it look more like a Peterbilt, right? So I got this 3D printed hood and fenders from True Scale RC. And they were 3D printed. I had to lop the back of these off so they matched my shortened bumper. Otherwise, they would have matched the full length bumper and wrapped around more. And these are built to be scale correct for a Peterbilt truck. So they also are meant to work with the original cab. They have two versions of it. One version's meant to work with the original cab, one's meant to work with, they also have the 3D printed cab. This cab for me is close enough, so I was happy with that. And it works really killer with this grill too. And this is Lisu, is who makes it. Lisu grill and lights here. So this all comes with this, the lights, and that's it. So if you'll notice, there's some screen mesh behind that grill. That's just aluminum window screen that I turned 45 degrees and then cut to fit inside. And this actually has another piece that looks just like this outside piece that goes on the inside, and then it has a set screw to tighten to lock it in place. So it holds that in between it. It's not glued or anything. So that's kind of cool. But I had to cut my own thing. But you can put whatever you want inside of there. It doesn't have to be that screen. It could be anything else. You could paint a different color before you put it in or anything. Now, it does not come with the Peterbilt logo. I found that on the eBay. That was like $10 for that. But if you'll notice, it's like 3D, like the real one. See, it bubbles out. So that's really cool. It's not just a flat sticker. And it's actually silver, too, in there. It's not white ink or anything. And then, of course, you can't help but notice this beautiful swan here on the hood. So this swan was also off the eBay. And that was probably like, I think between $10 and $15 for the little swan. Other eBay findings. This guy here, that was probably like 30 bucks on the eBay. This is aluminum. I hit it quick with some polish and a Dremel to give it a nice shine. I didn't sand it down. It was a mill finish. And it still has some. You can see it on here and you can feel that mill finish edge from where it was on the lathe turned out. And then I got these guys here. These lights were the cab lights. They were from True Scale RC as well. I did not use the original ones that come in the kit. So they use the 3mm LEDs, and they're just drilled, holes drilled in the cab, and the LEDs poke right up into the bottom of it. And then there's a single screw that holds those down in place. So I had to use styrene and fill that sunroof up and fill all those holes and then re-drill them. This here visor is one I made myself from some 32 thousandths aluminum. I just cut it, bent it up, trimmed it nice and straight and pretty, and filed it, and then polished her up and screwed it on. I don't like the flat. I like it sticking out. Yes, that's how most of the real ones are. I like it. It's not that all the way down like the one that comes with it, where you don't have a windshield anymore. This looks like one you'd see on the road. Now you'll notice the chrome's different between these and this, and this and this, right? That's because these are the original stuff from the kit. But so these pipes, actually, I get a lot of questions about them. Came in the kit, no joke, came in the kit. Although they were straight, and they have the little plastic tips, the little mule ear tips that you'd put in the top, and they'd be about, I don't know, this tall completely. But I just wanted a classic look, so just lop them off. Nice miter 45. Touch up, apparently they're brass, so when you cut it, this will be gold. So I just used some silver paint and brushed it around over the brass. A couple other notifications you'll notice on this cab that make a huge difference. This, it doesn't exist on this, does it? No, on the original it goes like something like this, way out here, or something silly, I don't know. So, and it doesn't come down here. This seam right here would be the bottom of the cab. Same on the sleeper. So I made these little skirts out of styrene, 63,000 styrene for these, and they're actually glued. There's a little doubler, another piece of the same styrene that's like a 1/4 inch wide, that's glued up behind it to tie them onto there. The top of the sleeper, Peterbilt flat top, needs to have a flat top, right? Sure, it has a little curve normally. This one doesn't, but it should be level with the cab. So what I did is I took this and I chopped it right along this seam here. I think I used the Dremel with a cutting wheel on it, like a saw cutting wheel, not a grinding cutting wheel, you know, like you'd use for metal. And I cut it off all the way around on the seam, and then I cut like a 1/2 inch off this top piece. So just right up to the bottom of that radius, and then I set it right back down and glued it back in. So for all my styrene glue, what I use is Plastruct bonding. Works great. You just put the two pieces of plastic together. This little, you see there's a stick in the middle, that's like a little brush on the end of it, and you just put a drop and brush it along the seam, and it just wicks throughout your overlapping parts, or in your corners where your joints are or something. Just wicks through that whole joint, and it melts that plastic, and then it bonds together. Now the paint job. I wanted it to be bright and get your attention, but I wanted it, again, like the front here, to be classy, classic, something you'd see on the road. And what I did is I sanded off the chrome on the tanks here, except for on the straps. I left those, and then I masked off the straps and painted the tanks. Otherwise, those are also the tanks from the kit. And then come around the back, you'll see this. This is from the kit, but I drilled and installed some LED lights in there, and those light bezels and the clear lenses that are in them are sold as a pair, and I got those off of the True Scale RC. Same with all the ones in my bumpers. They're the exact same ones. These ones are for 5mm LEDs. They literally just pop in the back, and that's that. And then down here, you'll notice there's a plate. It's another polished aluminum. I just had a piece of aluminum, so it was big enough, a scrap from another build, so I notched it out so the shaft would fit. Made some little brackets, and the brackets actually made from a piece of this back bumper that I'm going to show you in a minute. They're the cutoffs, and they're just little L's, one on each side, with screws into here and screws into there. I was able to drill and tap, so that way I can just screw them on. So I cut the notch, the drive shaft clears, polished it up, and then drilled it and pressed in those LEDs there as well. And then here I kind of did the same, but instead of, I was using one of these bumpers. So I actually got two of these bumpers. One's on the back, one's in here. Chopped it off, and that piece that used to go all the way up this tall, that's what I used for the brackets there. I also used some of it for the brackets that hold itself on here. And then I drilled and installed these LEDs as well, and made a nice little cover plate out of aluminum. So this would normally be hollow, and all your LED wires and everything run through it. And I put that myself on there, cutting it out of 30 thousandths aluminum. Same with the back bumper, and that's just to hide the wires and make the lights look realistic, so it's not like they're shining through every side of the truck. And then on the back, I did again the full 3 or 5mm LEDs, and then I got my two backup lights up here. So now the way I wired them so I think the outside two are blinkers, and on here these are blinkers. The rest of these are actually the running light and brake light, and then these three in the center are also brake and marker lights. These four and these four and the four on the other side are just marker lights. Now I also get questions about these fenders. Where'd I get them? But they, no joke, came in the Grand Hauler kit. They just, I know they don't look like they're this big in the kit because you got the original tires. They're taller, and it's sitting off the ground, so these will be up here normally, right? Well, after slamming it and putting on these lower tires, now they would get the look that I think they were going for when they put those in the kit, you know? Before I flip it over, you'll notice there's another thing on the fifth wheel. So it's the original fifth wheel plate that's mounted to my new plate. And I have a notch cut, and there's a cable. So what I did is I ran this back to a servo that I made a little pulley for that cable, so when it turns, it pulls the cable to open the fifth wheel like that, right? So what that does is it lets me from having that arm and all that stuff up here to just having that, which is kind of like an easier way to hide it and make it look more realistic. We'll flip it up and we'll look at the underneath side so you can see some of the other things that I'm about to talk about. So you'll notice I have two very long drive shafts in here, and then one very short drive shaft. So none of these came in the kit. These were all special bought ones, not special custom or anything. This one is, but this one is not. It's a 150 to 195mm shaft from Integy. They're aluminum scale looking with their little ends on here. They're pretty neat. I don't know, lose the little nuts very easily. And then this carrier bearing I got off the eBay too. It's aluminum and just has bearing with two outputs, so this will bolt right on it. And then back here, it just bolts on in place of the original stuff, instead of that cup that would be original. Got this a nice little Integy one for back here. I don't remember the size of it, and it doesn't say on it. Actually, sorry, that's a Lisu one. So that one I got from the truck shop as well. Now this one is the same shaft as this, but if you look, 150 to 195, 150 to 195. It's actually two of them. So this is 3 drive shafts right here. And what I did is I cut this out of one, and I cut a bit of this off of one, and I put it as a joint in between and epoxied them together and then installed it back together like normal. And what that did is that extended it about another 50 millimeters so I could get one shaft in here and not have to put another carrier bearing with 2 little shafts. So there you go, spins freely. Got all the original kit stuff here. Like I said, original transmission. These are all the original plastic parts except for this one with the carrier bearing. And then here you can see my small servo, some little metal gear servo that has the pulley on it with the cable. It pulls through this aluminum tube that's guided up to the 5th wheel. So that's what opens my 5th wheel right here. And then the rest of this, these are all the wires coming from the lights from the bumpers. See? So that's what all those are. Other than that, that's this truck in a nutshell. Something else I did, you'll see this radio sitting back here. So I changed the way it kind of talks to it, right? So once I had it set up on a Spectrum, I then went ahead and got this radio, which is pretty cool. And I changed the functions. So I moved some of the sticks around. So in other words, because this is completely programmable, whereas the Spectrum isn't. So it's still plugged into all the Spectrum channels and everything just like it was Spectrum. However, what I did is I reassigned the channels within here. So now they make a little bit more sense. So you'll see this thing might cut out because it does that. All right, now I can't even remember where I moved them all. I put my shift servo on one too. So this changes it, so I no longer have to move this to shift. So now it'd be in 1 gear, 2 gear, 3 gear. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Nice. This should be driving. Okay, so I haven't actually run this since I programmed it. So apparently the only gear that works right now, I have to adjust my throws for it, is the middle gear. So now if you'll see, I put steering and drive on the same channel like most RC things would be, and it makes it a little more natural. Now you'll notice blinkers don't come on when I go full turn because I set my limits and I didn't reteach the MFC. Or the MFC 01, yeah. I didn't reteach it. So there's my 5th wheel. See that pulls it. So the spring's not quite strong enough for it to return, and it's momentary, but it'll return on its own. When the truck kind of flicks it, it'll do its own thing. Oh, there we go. There we go. I just figured out what I did. All right. So now this one does my dual rates. Look at that. All right. So here. Oh, I got 2 lights still out. This plate on the back is too tight. I gotta loosen it up. See? Let's shorten it out. Cutting the signal. Gotta loosen it up. I think on the bottom, or maybe. Oh, I gotta tighten it up. Would you look at that? Yep. So it's a bad connection. I gotta take that plate off and fix that one day. But that was pretty sweet, doesn't it? With all those lights going. So like I said, there's the little markers. My blinkers are in this piece under the headlight. Like I said, until I reteach that MFC 01, they're not going to work. And I'm not going to reteach it. I'm just going to wait till I get that other thing that's going to replace it. There's the 3mm lights for the cab lights, all lit up and working. middle bumper because they face the front, right? And they're kind of dark. They're not super bright, right? Because they're dual intensity. So they'll brighten up with the blinker. Bloop, bloop, bloop. But then also, I didn't want it to be super bright because they shouldn't be. I want it like a truck. They illuminate. They don't illuminate the ground, so to speak. And in the back, there's that. And if you see, the reverse lights work as well. So how sick is that? That's pretty cool. Now, one problem I got with it as it is it sits too low. Now, if you ask me, low is cool, low looks good. But it sits so low right now that it doesn't get over much, and the back actually tires will bottom out on here, so it doesn't get much suspension. And then it takes weight off of one of these, and then you get stuck, right? And you can see they're all chipped up on the bottoms from rocks. So I want to put some adjustable suspension on here when I do the overhaul as well. We'll just make it better. Bop, bop. Oh man, it's cool. Oh, there we go. The hazards. I forgot it did that. So now with the hazards, you can see my lights that are in there. I got 3 and 3 on each side, in the front, and then the back. You can see the dual intensity flashing. Same here. Wonder how I did that. Oh, there we go. I managed to get them off. Oh, just a little bump. That's cool. Let me get that set while we're here, huh? Let's see. So on an airplane, you'd have your rudder, your throttle, and your rudder. So it's the rudder. So there you go. See, minus 60 to 60. So let's give it a little more weight. So now we're up to 71. So I don't want it to hit the end of its travel. That actually looks pretty good. Let's see, does it have first gear now? So I might have actually broken the gearbox. Let's give it a little more weight. Oh! Nice! I was sad when I thought I broke something. Whew. Oh. This is what should be pull anything gear right now. And here's what I'm talking about where it doesn't, I don't think, give full power. Ready? You saw how even to that it had to build up to that speed. It didn't just instant be it. So here's the different speeds. 1. See you next time.